is my honor, true honor, to present to you dear friends of mine. And the title is Challenges in Mexican Education and TISU's Casa Tatic. Public education in Mexico is facing serious problems: high teacher-student ratio, frequent class suspensions, low level of commitment from families and school personnel, etc. Wait a minute, is this the United States? Yeah, sorry. Retired teacher. Learn about Guadalajara's Casa Tatic, founded in 2015 to alleviate some of these deficiencies by offering remedial education to kids from public elementary school. This is an inspiring story of one woman, as well as the team she recruited and trained, making a huge difference. So whether you're interested in Mexican education or not, it's always inspiring to hear the story of someone who stands up, takes responsibility, and changes the lives of others. Matilda Cervantes, also known as Tisu, earned an undergraduate degree in psychology and a master's in educational management, both from ITESO, the Universidad Jesuita de Guadalajara, and has worked for 35 years as a psychologist, teacher, and teacher trainer. So without further ado, Tisu, the stage is yours. I should say before she speaks, she will present in Spanish. Her husband, Bill, will translate, and this is part of our outreach to try to make not only the Lake Chapala Society, but Open Circle, a place not just for expat, but for everybody.
Buenos
So,
días,
big applause.
gracias por venir.
Good morning, thank you for being here.
Bueno, hay muchas cosas importantes en la educación pública básica.
Okay, there are many important factors in elementary public education.
Las cuestiones gubernamentales, el presupuesto, el porcentaje destinado del PIB en México es de 3.2% y a nivel mundial o internacional se recomiendan al menos el 4%. Entonces, esto dista mucho de que estemos haciendo lo correcto en ese sentido. El más alto es Noruega con 6.6.
Okay, yeah, the first part of the talk is going to be about some of the sort of structural or systemic deficiencies in public education in Mexico. And so the first one that she mentions is budgeting. She says in Mexico, the government allocates 3.2% of the GNP to education. International authorities like UNESCO recommend at least 4%. And so Mexico is a little bit low in that particular area. The country with the highest percentage of its GNP dedicated to education is Norway, with 6%.
Wow.
Hay otras políticas educativas también muy importantes que hacen que esto sea difícil. Las metodológicas, por ejemplo, el método para enseñar a leer hace como 3-4 años, dicen que en 20 días pueden aprender a leer los niños. Eso no es cierto, lo hemos comprobado con nuestra experiencia. Además, programas cargados de contenidos relevantes e irrelevantes que los hace desperdiciar el tiempo porque no se enfocan en lo más importante.
Okay, so another factor that she has noticed is kind of the educational policy and methodologies that they use in public schools. Maybe 4 or 5 years ago, they came out with a new program for teaching kids to read and write. And it's called Reading in 20 Days. And she says, no, that's not possible. Our experience is you can't expect kids to be able to read in 20 days. And she said the school programs, the curricula that they use in elementary schools are kind of content heavy. They have a lot of content. Some content is relevant, some content is less relevant. But teachers, when they try to cover all of that content, necessarily have to neglect some of the most basic and fundamental things like learning how to read. And so that's not helping things.
Los horarios escolares, según un estudio del ITESO, el horario real en la educación pública básica es de 1.5 horas, el horario real de enseñanza-aprendizaje. Es decir, ellos entran a las 8 de la mañana, salen 12:30 de la mañana, y en esas 4 horas y media suceden tantas cosas que solo tienen 1 hora y media real. de clase.
Okay, so in practical school organization as well, kids start school, and if they go in the morning at 8 o'clock in the morning, and they get out at 12:30, so you'd say, well, they're in school for 4.5 hours. But a study that was done at ITESO, the university in Guadalajara, found that in a typical public school, of those 4.5 hours, only about 1.5 hours are really dedicated to learning. There are so many other things that are going on, kids lining up, recess, checking homework. A lot of time is wasted kind of in the practical day-to-day organization of public schools.
Además, hay otras cosas que son logístico-prácticas que también hacen que la calidad no sea la correcta. Suspensiones muy frecuentes, actividades no académicas como kermeses, preparación y realización de festivales, etc.
Yeah, another thing is that there are a lot of interruptions in school. A lot of days there are no classes because teachers are having meetings or there are holidays, or for lots of different reasons, classes are suspended on many days. And then even when the kids are in class, a lot of time is dedicated to organizing fairs, festivals, other things that might be valuable, but they do take time away from the basic learning.
Y una de las más importantes es el número de alumnos con relación al adulto o maestro. Allí, por ejemplo, en las escuelas públicas casi siempre son más de 40 alumnos. Entonces, a veces hasta cerca de 50. Yo tengo una de mis maestras que trabajaba conmigo que tenía 46 niños en primero de primaria para aprender a leer. Eso es algo casi imposible porque son muchos niños para una sola maestra. Sin embargo, pues claro que eso va a afectar mucho la calidad educativa.
Yeah, another very important systemic factor is the ratio between teachers and students. So a typical class in a public school would have 40 students working with one teacher. And she mentions one teacher that was working in our project in the Casa Tatic, who also taught at a public school in Guadalajara. She taught the first grade and she had 46 students. So she, on her own, had to teach 46 students how to read and write. And it's not possible. It's not possible to provide quality education under those conditions.
El sistema de enseñanza-aprendizaje, generalmente el maestro se centra en los alumnos que tienen mejores posibilidades intelectuales o escolares y entonces va con ellos, va con los que mejor reaccionan, mejor aprenden y deja a un lado los niños que tienen neurodivergencias o algunas otras maneras específicas de aprender. El profesor se enfoca en el grupo y no en las necesidades particulares de los alumnos, pues es más o menos lógico porque son muchos.
Yeah. And so what happens under those conditions is many teachers, what they end up doing is focusing on the kids who are motivated, who are learning, who respond well, and the kids who are falling behind, who have neurodivergences, who have learning problems of some kind, they're just sort of left behind. They fall behind. They fall through the cracks because it's just so hard under those conditions to provide that kind of quality personalized education for the neediest kids.
Los alumnos, hasta la ley decía hasta hace un par de años que debían aprobar independientemente de lo que hubieran podido alcanzar durante el ciclo escolar. Ahorita la ley cambió, sin embargo se sigue aplicando el mismo sistema, que los alumnos pasan y pasan y pasan de grado sin tener las competencias ni el conocimiento necesario. Por ejemplo, vamos a una secundaria en el municipio de Tlajomulco y nos hemos encontrado con al menos 7 alumnos de primero y segundo de secundaria que no saben leer y escribir.
So there was an explicit policy, educational policy, up to about 2 or 3 years ago, that children were to pass to the next grade whether they had learned what they needed to learn or not. And so many kids were passing on to second grade, third grade, sixth grade without having learned what they were supposed to learn in that year. And that policy was rescinded a couple years ago, but in practice it's still being applied. Sometimes it's easier for the teachers and the parents just to say, pass the child anyway. And she said, we've seen the results of this. They've started to work, the teachers from the Casa Tatic have started to work in a junior high school in Tlajomulco, and they found, they just started there and they did a diagnosis of a number of children. And they found at least seven kids in junior high school, we're talking 7th and 8th grade, who don't know how to read and write, who've gotten that far in the school system without learning basic literacy.
También, por supuesto, los asuntos familiares son muy importantes por las dificultades económicas de las familias, las dificultades emocionales, la estructura social en la que están insertos, la conformación familiar, la violencia doméstica, el abuso de drogas, etcétera. Por supuesto que afectan la calidad.
Yeah, obviously another factor that affects children's learning is their home situation. And so, just like anywhere in the world, there are many families that are dysfunctional, that have economic problems, emotional problems, domestic violence, substance abuse within the families. And so obviously these kinds of conditions that children are living in day to day are going to affect the quality of their learning.
Y tengo unos casos específicos muy duros. Por ejemplo, una niña que le cambié el nombre, se llama Kim, está institucionalizada en un albergue del DIF en Guadalajara. A ella, su mamá acaba de salir de la cárcel, estuvo 3 años en la cárcel porque a ella y a sus 2 hermanas su mamá las prostituía. Entonces esa niña tiene tratamiento psiquiátrico, tiene un muy complejo panorama emocional, pues que ha sido muy difícil trabajar con ella, pero ya está leyendo y además la parte emocional ha estado mucho más controlada.
Yeah, just some kind of specific cases, some of the very most extreme cases. They've been working with one girl who's institutionalized in an institution run by DIF Guadalajara. She's there because her mother was imprisoned. Her mother was in prison, she just got out of prison. But she was imprisoned because she prostituted her own children, including this girl. But she's been making progress. With the attention from the Casa Tatic, now she's learning. Obviously she has a lot of emotional problems to work through and is receiving psychiatric care. But even that's improving. She's starting to work through the problems that she's had to live at her very young and tender age.
Tenemos otra niña que ella no está institucionalizada, pero está en un programa especializado del DIF, donde la niña tenía una dificultad muy seria para aprender. Tuvimos que iniciar 2 veces el proceso con ella. Y la semana pasada nos enteramos que su mamá intentó suicidarse y que ella fue la que tuvo que mediar la situación. Tiene 8 años.
Yeah. Another girl who's 8 years old is, she goes to a special program run by DIF in Tlacomulco, but she's not institutionalized. She lives with her family. But for many reasons, she hadn't gone to school. And she started the actual process of learning to read twice with Casa Tatic at DIF Tlacomulco. The first time she had to interrupt it because her family situation didn't allow her to continue. Then she came back and was making very good progress in learning how to read and write. But then her mother attempted suicide. And she, at the age of 8, actually had to intervene, call for help. And so once again, the process was interrupted. So these aren't exactly institutional, systemic factors, but they are realities for many of the children in the public school system in Mexico.
Yes. Y el tercer ejemplo de este momento es una niña que vivía con la mamá vivía con una nueva pareja, ya era una nueva familia con 2 niños pequeños, ella con 6 años y la mamá se mata en un accidente de moto y entonces la niña va a vivir con su papá biológico que no tenía tanta relación y con su abuela que tenía prácticamente nula relación. Entonces para ella fue un gran mundo diferente, nuevo, difícil, para ella y su abuela y todos.
Yeah, this was another case of a girl in our particular neighborhood where the Casa Tatic started just working with neighborhood kids. And this girl lived with her mother and her stepfather, and but the mother was killed in a motorcycle accident. And so that family had to be split up. She went back to live with her father, her biological father, whom she hardly knew, and her grandmother, who she did not know at all. And so this was a huge disruption in her life, and obviously it affected her learning.
Ok, ahora pasemos a la formación de profesores que influye mucho en la falta de la calidad educativa. La vocación aunada a las oportunidades de estudio. Es decir, no todos los profesores tienen una vocación primero que los motiva a ser profesores. Y un ejemplo que recuerdo con mucha claridad es que Una vez que yo di un curso hace muchos años, el profesor me dijo, es que yo quería ser ingeniero, pero el dinero no alcanzaba en mi casa para que yo pudiera hacer eso, entonces estudié para ser profesor.
Okay, so now she wants to talk a little bit about teacher training, this kind of training that teachers receive in order to be public school teachers. And she says it's often very deficient. One of the problems is the actual vocation itself, that there are a number of teachers who, for different reasons, because of their own economic situation or the opportunities that were provided, were not able to study what they really wanted to do. She said once when I was giving a teacher training course, one of the teachers confessed to her, I really wanted to be an engineer, that was my dream in life, but I wasn't able to. For different family circumstances, I wasn't able to, so kind of the best alternative that I could find was to be a teacher. And so not all teachers have really a true vocation.
Las clases en la normal de profesores, los maestros como que adquieren la cultura porque les transmiten la idea de que allí les están enseñando todo lo que necesitan saber, pero con un énfasis en el contenido de cada grado y no exactamente en los procesos de aprendizaje, competencias, formas de que los niños aprendan, etc.
Yeah, and another, in the actual teachers' colleges, when teachers are being trained to teach, the focus tends to be very much on the content. And so the teachers learn exactly what the content is for each level, first grade, second grade, third grade, but not nearly as much time is devoted to pedagogy, to what how learning actually takes place, what the learning process is, and what teachers need to do so that students can actually assimilate that content.
Hay una capacitación, se supone, permanente para los profesores, pero está muy relacionada con el punto anterior, porque generalmente esas capacitaciones o son más bien unos encuentros sociales, donde platican algunas cosas de los niños, algunas cosas de las circunstancias en las que está la escuela, y desayunan y hacen como muchas cosas y un poquito de más contenidos.
Yeah, there are professional development courses for teachers who are already in service, but in practice they're not very effective. A lot of times it's sort of more of the same, the kind of learning that they did in the teachers' colleges. A lot of times they waste a lot of time eating breakfast, chatting, socializing, but it's not really effective professional development.
Claro que el compromiso de cada profesor es muy importante y puede ser que haya muchos profesores con falta de compromiso, pero aquí nuestro ejemplo es muy positivo. Una maestra en un medio no rural, pero semi-rural, en un ciclo escolar enseñó a 42 niños a leer, quedándose fuera de clase con ellos, con los que llevaban un ritmo más lento, y todos leyeron.
Yeah, another important factor obviously is the level of commitment of teachers, and that can vary. In this case, she wants to provide a positive example of a teacher who she worked with, who worked in a small town, kind of in a semi-rural setting, and she taught the first grade. She had 42 students in her group, but she was willing to spend time after school. She stayed late after the school day was over to work precisely with the kids who were not learning quickly, who needed more time. And so she dedicated that time to her students, and at the end of the school year, all 42 of her students learned to read. But unfortunately, not all the teachers have that level of commitment.
Por supuesto que las nuevas políticas del gobierno anterior y el actual, dando becas, abriendo universidades, etcétera, ayudan a enfrentar este gran problema, pero está a tal grado el daño de muchos años en la historia que es muy complejo de solucionar el sistema educativo mexicano.
Yeah, there have been some hopeful developments in the previous presidential administration and this one, where they do seem to be giving more emphasis to education, allocating more resources, but the problem is so entrenched that it's going to take a long time to overcome those deficiencies.
Porque es multifactorial, hay muchas cosas que se deben mejorar.
Yeah, there are so many different factors involved. She just covered some of them, and so it's a big challenge.
Detectando todo lo anterior es que necesitamos proyectos como la Casa Tatic, nuestro proyecto. Obviamente no intentamos resolver los grandes problemas sistémicos, pero intentamos aportar un grano de arena.
Yeah, so now she's going to start to talk about her own particular project. Having seen these challenges that students in public schools are facing, she said, what can I do? I want to intervene somehow. And so she came up with this project 10 years ago called the Casa Tatik. She says, I realize that this is not addressing the huge structural and systemic challenges that the public education system is facing, but this is what I felt that I could do.
Nacimos hace casi 10 años. Inicialmente teníamos la misión de regularizar a niños a nivel primario, solamente en nuestra colonia, que es una colonia suburbana de Guadalajara, El Briceño. Ahora nos enfocamos en cualquier persona que no sepa leer y escribir, ni matemáticas básicas, y vamos a lugares muy diferentes y remotos para nosotros.
The project started 10 years ago, right in the neighborhood where we live, which is called El Briceño. It's kind of on the outskirts of Guadalajara. And so the project started out by working with kids from the local neighborhood public schools who were struggling with their learning for one reason or another. And so we provided after-school remediation sessions for kids who came, and we worked with whatever sort of need that they had. This was for kids from grades 1 through 6, elementary school kids. All right. But then we also started offering English classes because a lot of the kids were interested in English classes as well. The project has evolved over the years, sort of realizing what our limitations were and also what the greatest needs were. So now the project is focusing much more just on teaching literacy, teaching kids who have not yet learned how to read and write. And so we're not working so much with kids who are struggling with different subjects in school. We're focusing more on kids who need to read and write. Okay. The other way that the project has evolved is we used to just work in our home with the kids from our neighborhood. But then TISU reached out, or other organizations reached out to TISU saying, we would like to replicate your method. And so we came into contact with some populations who were even needier than the kids in our neighborhood, like these kids who are institutionalized, kids who go to these DEEF programs, you know, the social service programs. And so she said, yeah, if this is where the needs are, that's where we want to go. And so now we're working less in our own home. We still do work with kids from the neighborhood, but the TISU and her team of teachers now goes out to different settings and different scenarios around the Guadalajara metropolitan area where there are kids who need to learn how to read and write. And not just kids, sometimes they're older, teenagers, adolescents.
¿Se imaginan si ustedes no supieran leer? ¿Cómo sería su vida?
Yeah, she says, a thought experiment. Imagine yourselves, if you can imagine you didn't know how to read and write, what would your life be like?
Nuestra intención es darles herramientas para afrontar la vida futura de nuestros alumnos, tanto a nivel personal como laboral. Lo hacemos con un método muy específico, muy probado, para que logren leer en el menor tiempo posible.
So the current objective of the project is to give kids the tools that they need, or at least one tool that they need that will improve their lives, that will improve their future, both at the personal level in terms of jobs that they might be able to get, and also their time in school, that they're able to go to school. Having this very, very basic skill of literacy and basic numeracy as well is something that will make a big difference in their lives. We use a very specific method that's been proven to work and works in a relatively short amount of time, not 20 days like the official public policy promises, but yes, but it has been shown to work with many kids.
Este es nuestro material base, es un material muy viejo, tiene mi edad casi 60 años o como 60 años, y es lo más importante que hacemos, es nuestra base, como decía. Tiene un enunciado generador, después unas palabras que tienen que revisar por sílabas y pegar, luego tienen que leer, copiar y dibujar, y finalmente esto es lo que llaman en las escuelas personalizadas un autodictado, que es solamente escribir el nombre del dibujo. Esto es maravilloso porque desde el principio está intentando irse al significado, a la comprensión, no es solamente silábico, que ese es el material de los 20 días, sino hay una parte silábica, pero lo más importante es el significado y la comprensión. Entonces, esto es muy, muy importante, pero no todos los niños pueden seguir el ritmo de este material. ¿Qué? ¡Oh! Claro que sí, pero puedo...
Yeah. This is the basic material that they use. And she says, this is nothing new. This material is as old as she is. It goes back about 60 years. It's called the Cuadernillo Monterrey. And this is kind of the basic material that they use to work with the kids. And the system is that it starts with a sentence that's made up of words that have very simple syllables that start with a consonant and then have a vowel. And the child learns to read that together with the student, and then there are sort of follow-up exercises where they analyze the words, where they put the syllables together to form the words, where they cut up the syllables and put them back together, draw the picture, and then the last exercise is what they call a self-dictation, where the child sees a picture of the ideas that they've been working with, and has to write that sentence themselves. So it's a syllabic method. It does use phonics and syllables, but it is never divorced from meaning. And that's the important thing. It starts out with a sentence that has meaning, that the child can understand. And she said that's one of the important differences with this 20-day method that the education ministry is using in the schools, which is only syllabic. The children learn to read syllables, but that have no meaning. All right? She says it's very important that the child see that these syllables and these letters are saying things that can be understood.
Y es también muy importante cómo ellos van adquiriendo el significado, porque a veces si leen, por ejemplo, come, para ellos dicen ka, que, ko, ki, ko. O sea, están enfocados en las sílabas y entonces las repasan hasta llegar a la que es con la vocal que es. ¿Me entiendes?
No.
Ok, voy a volver a decirlo. Sí, ellos normalmente cuando aprenden por sílabas, dicen, por ejemplo, van a poner mantel o mejor mesa. Entonces ellos dicen me, porque tienen que repasar mentalmente el orden de las sílabas.
Okay. Yeah. When they learn by the syllabic method, sometimes they come across a new word like mesa that they have to read, and so they go through their list of syllables that they've been learning, ma, me, mi, mo, and then they hit, oh yeah, this is saying me, all right? But by going through all of those sort of contortions, they forget about what the word might be meaning. And so the method that she uses, the Cuadernillo Monterrey or the Casa Tati method, tries to keep the kid grounded in meaning, in things that they can understand.
Pero siempre estamos atentos al proceso del niño y si el niño ya puede pasar a la siguiente unidad o tiene que reforzar más las consonantes trabajadas.
Okay. And the other kind of secret to the method is it's very personalized. And the teachers always work with very small groups of students at a time so that they can see what each individual child's learning process is. And if they're assimilating what they need to learn. If they haven't assimilated, then they can devote more time to that. And before they move on to the next step. And so there's kind of very close monitoring of each student's learning process.
Sí. Y para eso tenemos muchos otros apoyos. Aquí traje dos, solamente para que esta es una unidad con la consonante M, porque además el sistema es fonético. Y ellos repasan esa consonante con este material si lo necesitan. Hay niños que no lo necesitan.
Yeah. So they also have additional material aside from what the Cuadernillo Monterrey, from the basic material. They have materials from other methods that are used to reinforce. But again, some kids don't need it. Some kids can go through the basic steps and then they assimilate what they need to assimilate. And so they can move on to the next set of syllables or the next set of letters. Other kids who are not getting it, well, then they can devote some more time to these supplemental exercises. Again, so that each kid really is assimilating what they need to know before they go on to the next step. And they're not replicating what happens in many public schools, where kids pass from one year to the next without knowing what they need to know.
Un material complementario maravilloso es este de una editorial española, que cuando doy mis cursos de capacitación les digo no se preocupen, yo tengo los derechos porque mi amiga me dijo que sí, que es la distribuidora aquí en México.
Yeah. So this is another set of materials that they have. It's from actually a Spanish publisher, but they did adapt the materials to sort of Mexican culture. And she says, whenever I give workshops, I assure people I have the right to reproduce this material because a friend of mine who gave them to me said, yeah, go ahead, you can use them.
Yes, por la población con la que trabajo.
Yeah, because of the kind of population that she works with.
Yeah.
So what the Casa Tactic does is it reproduces all of this material itself. So it has kind of its basic stock of material and then makes photocopies to be able to work with these kids. So they don't need to buy the books. But again, the publisher itself said, in this case, with this kind of population,
Lo muy hermoso de este material es que va muy de la mano con el Cuadernillo Monterrey, entonces hacemos 5 unidades del Cuadernillo Monterrey, vamos a este para repasar y reforzar, y este tiene muchas habilidades del pensamiento, con este comparan, clasifican, etc. Son muy diversos los ejercicios para reforzar lo que están aprendiendo.
Yeah, she says this material complements the Cuadernillo Monterrey very well. They go through maybe 5 lessons or 5 units of the Cuadernillo Monterrey, learning different new consonant-vowel combinations. And then they use this material to reinforce. And at the same time, this material has such a variety of exercises that the kids are also learning other kinds of mental processes, like comparing, classifying, other kinds of sort of more abstract processes at the same time that they're reinforcing the literacy, the basic literacy.
Y hasta el número 3, esta colección es de 18 libros.
Okay, yeah. This material consists of 18 books in a series.
¿Ya? Pero cuando llegan a la número 4, que son sílabas trabadas, es cuando yo digo, ya sabe leer.
Yeah. But she says when they get to book number 4, which is when they start to work with more complex consonant combinations, especially, words like brapso, where it's 2 consonants and then a vowel, or a syllable that ends in a consonant, not a vowel. All right, that's a little bit more complex for kids. But when they get that far, if the kids are able to master that kind of reading, then she says, we can say now that these kids have learned to read. They've got the basics for kind of moving forward on their own.
Ok. Ahora, matemáticas.
Okay, mathematics, because we also work on basic numeracy, not just basic literacy.
Ahorita vamos a pasar este material, pero esto se llama regletas y lo usan mucho en educación personalizada.
Yeah, so this is a kind of material that they use for mathematics, hands-on, concrete material that kids can actually touch with their fingers. It's called regletas, like little rulers. It's something that's used a lot in private schools, personalized education.
Yes. Y aquí lo que intentamos es que ellos, como las matemáticas son muy abstractas, que empiecen por lo concreto. En Singapur hay un método que incluye esto, y que es el que ha dado pauta para muchas partes del mundo, entre ellas México. Estos son los números del 1 al 10, ¿ok? Pero después de enseñar números, que es lo básico para niños pequeños, entonces nos vamos a la base 10, ¿ok? Empezar.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, what the kids learn with that material are numbers. So those little rulers represent the numbers from 1 to 10. It's always a challenge to teach arithmetic, basic math, because it's something that's very abstract. And so the logic behind this method is we start with something very concrete, and the kids start to assimilate the abstract concepts, first of all, through very concrete learning experiences. And so with this material, which was actually developed in Singapore and is used in schools in Singapore, but now is used in many other parts of the world, the students first learn the ideas of the basic quantities, the basic amounts, numbers 1 to 10. And then after that, they move on to operations, the basic operations of addition, subtraction.
Ok, thank you. Cuando ya saben los números básicos del 1 al 10, entonces vamos al concepto de unidad, decena y centena, que eso nos va a llevar a que los niños vean exactamente en qué consiste esto. 10 unidades nos llevan a una decena y 10 decenas nos llevan a una centena.
So the next step is to learn the base 10 system that our numerical system is based on, and how a number has a place value. So the number 1 can be 1 unit, or it can be 1 group of 10, or it can be 1 group of 100, depending on the place where it is. And so this kind of material shows that 10 of these little cubes make a 10, a group of 10. And 10 of those make the square. And so they learn that concept. Again, starting with concrete materials and moving towards the abstract principles.
Okay. En 10 centenas, una unidad de millar.
Yeah, and then you get up to the thousands.
Okay. They are very happy with that. Son muy felices con el material.
Yeah, they enjoy working with that kind of material very much.
Como hemos dicho, hemos estado yendo a casas hogares, a los DIF y ahora a una secundaria.
Yeah, so some of the new places where the Casa Tatic has been applying this principle are children's homes, so where children are institutionalized because they've had to be separated from the family for one reason or another. Also, these special DIF programs like in Tlajomulco, which is for kids who are not going to school for some reason or another because of their family situation. And so they try to sort of channel them into a structured program, and from there the idea is hopefully then they can start going to a regular school.
Sí,
Oh, and also they've started to work at this junior high school because they detected that even at the junior high school level, there are some students who haven't learned yet how to read and write.
Ok, nuestro sistema es llegar al lugar, evaluar a los niños, atenderlos y posteriormente ofrecer capacitación a los docentes para que ellos puedan continuar con el método.
Yeah, so the procedure that they follow when they start to work at a new setting is they show up, they evaluate the students to see exactly what their needs are, who needs the intervention of the Casa Tatic, and if they do, where do they need to start? How much do they know now, and where do they need to start? Then they have the intervention with the kids. Hopefully the kids learn what they need to learn. And then another part of the intervention at the institutional level is to provide training for the personnel at those places so that then they can replicate the method themselves.
Tanto la atención personalizada, el trato del método y el cariño hacen que los alumnos y alumnas se vayan sintiendo mejor consigo mismos, mejoran su autoestima y se empoderan.
Yeah, and another very important aspect of this method is kind of the affective, the emotional side. Again, the teachers are always working with small groups of students. They try to show a lot of affection. They try to give the kids an experience of success, which is something that many haven't had. So many associate schools and learning with frustration, with being bullied, with being humiliated, and so they try to counteract that with the actual emotional experience of learning. And so they try to make it enjoyable, they try to make it a place where the kids are happy to come, and most of the time that does happen. And so that obviously has implications for the children's self-esteem, which is another very important objective of the method.
¿Qué es lo que me motivó a crear la Casa Tatic?
Okay, so now she just wants to talk a little bit about her own personal process, how she came to start this project, what it is that motivated her.
El querer aportar para que el mundo sea mejor es una relación entre mi pasión, mi conciencia y compromiso social y una dosis de espiritualidad o religiosidad.
Yeah, she said her experience in education over 35 years, she could see this every day, what this need was in the world. And so she said, well, what can I do to make the world a better place? And she says it really kind of combines three different factors that are important for me. One is her passion. She loves to teach, and she especially loves to teach reading and writing. Also, kind of a social commitment. This is something that society needs, and it's important for me to respond with the tools that I have. And she says there's also kind of a religious and spiritual dimension to her motivation as well.
Considero que para hacer este aporte, mi día es trabajando de la manera en la que lo hago, de uno a uno, cambiando personas que con gran esperanza cambien su entorno, su familia, los amigos, su barrio, y esto contribuye a mejorar su mundo, nuestro mundo.
Okay, so she says, yeah, I mean, this is my personal response. I hope that this kind of intervention where I work sort of at the very basic level, one-on-one, with kids who need it, will make a difference in their lives, and then hopefully there'll be kind of a ripple effect, that there'll be improvements in their family, improvements in the neighborhood, and yeah, maybe improvements kind of at the higher, more systemic institutional level as well.
Muchas gracias por haber estado aquí.
First of all, there are brochures in both English and Spanish, and so they'll be available here about the entire program there. And by the way, they're always looking for donations to help them continue with their process. Now is the time for our mobile mic is on the fritz, so we're going to use this. So this is the time for questions and answers. Just a reminder, we're looking for questions and not discourses. And so if you have a question, you're welcome. If you'd like to do a discourse, see us afterwards and we'll get you up on this stage. But today is not the time.
My question is, are there public libraries around or only in big cities, and what can they do? In Holland we have volunteers that do read with the children books in little groups and things like that. How about this area?
Tisu, ¿quieres saber si en tu barrio hay bibliotecas para los niños? Y en las bibliotecas hay gente que lee para los niños, para que aprendan a disfrutar lectura en, ¿cómo se dice? Holland. ¿Irlandés? No.
Países Bajos. En Países Bajos.
No, but how do you say Holland?
Países Bajos, Netherlands.
Holanda. En Holanda sí hay esas cosas allá.
Nosotros tenemos el gran privilegio de tener también una biblioteca comunitaria, porque han estado llegando, o sea, hace años están llegando libros y nos permite, los niños todos los días toman libros, se los llevan a su casa y a veces las familias también vienen por libros a la biblioteca.
¿Esto está en la Casa Tatic?
Sí.
¿Hay otras bibliotecas?
No
en
que
el
yo
barrio?
conozca, en el barrio no.
Okay. She said that they have created a library in Casa Tatic, and not only kids but adults come to check out books, and it's completely free. But she says in the neighborhood there is no public library.
I just wanted to clarify that, Chapala does have a library, I think it's on Juarez, near the Malathon. So there is a library in Chapala, but there's also a public library, a private library for children that a lot of people don't know about, which has a Facebook page, which I'm trying to promote with the community there in San Juan Cosula. But there is a small private children's library in San Juan Cosula that I try to promote the kids that go to Portugal English classes. I try to promote the library with the kids in the community there as well in San Juan Cosula. But those are the only two libraries that I know of, Lakeside and the Wilkes Center. Wilkes Center also here in IE, but of course a big challenge is most people don't have cars to easily get to libraries, so if they're not close, it's more difficult.
I'd just like to make a quick comment that I have visited the Casa Tatic, the school, It's a great facility, and if you have a chance to get up to Guadalajara sometime, I'm sure, try and have coach 20 or 25 kids in your home at the same time.
I just want to say that here in Ajijic, we do have a public library. It is Wilkes, and they don't teach children, they teach, I think it's the youngest is 15 to adults. There are plenty of adults here in Ajijic along the lakefront that come. They have to pay 150 pesos to process them and take a test, and then they have to buy their books. A lot of times they need help buying their books. And I found out yesterday, I went to the recycle center, and sometimes people donate books, so I harvested them to take them back to Wilkes. If you enjoy teaching English, you don't have to know Spanish or any other language, but they would love to have you there.
Yeah.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you so much for your work. I wonder if you have seen any indication that Presidente Sheinbaum will make reforming public education a priority of her administration in Mexico.
Si tú has visto alguna indicación de que Sheinbaum vaya a ser como dar prioridad a la reforma de la educación.
Supuestamente el ciclo escolar anterior se hizo una gran reforma educativa, pero como muchas reformas en México, los que lo hacen están atrás de un escritorio en una oficina importante y no piensan en la manera en la que pueden capacitar a las personas, a los docentes, para que realmente se haga. Muchas veces son buenas las reformas, pero no la manera en la que llegan a los profesores y a los alumnos. Entonces, es muy complicado porque además después los profesores están enojados porque les piden ciertas cosas que no conocen y siguen con su método anterior y es muy difícil.
You'll do a better job than I will.
She says actually in the last presidential administration there was a significant educational reform. She said a lot of the ideas actually were quite good, but the problem is then in getting that to trickle down to the ground level. And so there isn't always enough training workshops so that teachers can actually learn the new methods, the new materials. A lot of times there's frustration and resentment on the part of the teachers because their supervisors are demanding certain things of them that they don't really understand, that they haven't learned, or that they don't have the materials and the resources for. And so a lot of times they just fall back on what they've been doing the whole time anyway. This new administration is so new that they're not sure if they're going to continue with that reform, if they're going to do another reform. But there have been efforts to reform public education. But again, getting them actually implemented on the ground level is a challenge.
I recall reading sometime over the past year that the teachers union went on strike objecting to competency exams for the teachers themselves. Is the teachers union itself part of the overall problem?
Yes.
Your talk was so inspiring. You know, education truly should be a human right, and the ability to read and write. Every human being on earth should have that.
Yeah.
So my question is regarding the teacher training, wondering how long it is, and whether or not people can be sent there or sponsored to get the teacher training, to try to get this system and this approach about literacy. For instance, in the lake area, I have a lot of ideas about it. I'd like to hear about those.
Creo que entendí, pero digo.
Pues estaba preguntando sobre la capacitación de maestros, cuánto tiempo y si podría haber manera pues de apoyar a gente para que estudien para ser maestros.
Sí, la capacitación de nuestro método es de 6 a 8 semanas, 2 sesiones a la semana.
The training that, oh, yeah. The training that she has provided for people to learn this very particular method is,
De 6 a 8 semanas, 2 veces por semana.
oh yeah, the 6 to 8 weeks, 2 sessions a week. But that can be enough for somebody to actually learn the method and be able to replicate it.
How long is session?
Una hora y media.
Oh, yeah, an hour and a half, sessions of an hour and a half.
Pero sí hay posibilidades de poder apoyar a alguien para que lo aprenda, sí.
Yeah, she says yes, there would be a possibility to provide that kind of training here in this area.
Yes.
Another question, is elementary education in Mexico obligatory, secular, and free?
Yes, la ley dice que sí, pero la realidad es diferente.
Yeah, the law says that yes, all of those three characteristics should be true of public education, but sometimes in practice, that's not the case. There are public schools, for example, that pressure the families to pay a certain amount of money. Sometimes because the schools really do not have resources. The state maybe provides a building and that's all.
No, y el sueldo de los maestros.
And the salary of the teachers, but sometimes that's not enough. And so school administrators, school principals, sometimes try to raise money on their own, sometimes with good intentions because they want to provide better education. But, I mean, they have to sort of pressure the families to pay a certain amount of fee, a certain fee to raise that money, which really contradicts the official policy of the Mexican government, which is education should be free. So there's tension around those principles.
There's a gentleman who used to give a talk here called State of the Lake. I forget his name. He's now deceased. But in the last talk that I attended, he did say that the high school graduation rate lakeside is less than 10%.
Less than what?
Less than 10%.
Thank you, Tisu and Bill, for coming from Guadalajara to present this topic. I have two questions. How do you interface with the public school system, and is there a way that they are basically funneling children of need to your program? And secondly, how do you raise money, and if you would, what is the annual budget that you work on? Because I think a lot of us here could see the need for a similar program here at Lakeside, and how would you suggest we get started?
Más o menos.
Y luego pregunta por el financiamiento del programa, cómo recaba fondos y más o menos cuál es el presupuesto anual de la casa Tatik, pensando si tiene algo similar.
Ajá. La primera vez que yo iba a hacer esto, fui a las escuelas públicas de mi colonia, que son 4, 2 en el turno matutino y 2 en el turno vespertino, o sea, 2 edificios con 2 turnos. Y dejé unos papelitos. Solamente he ido esa vez, porque entonces ahora es muy conocida la Casa Tatik, diciendo, mi niño necesita su ayuda, mi niño necesita su ayuda. Bueno, di eso.
So she said that when she was just starting out the program, yeah, she went and visited the 2 public schools that we have in our neighborhood, which are actually 4 schools because there's a morning shift and the afternoon shift in each one of those schools. And just sort of left little flyers saying we're providing this service. And so the first students started to arrive. She says, I've never had to return because just by word of mouth, parents started to find out about this service that was available, and so they show up at the door saying, can you accept my kid? So that's how it started.
Y falta una segunda pregunta. Nosotros hacemos una campaña de donación anual para todo el ciclo escolar. En Donadora, es fondeadora, donadora. Esa campaña generalmente solicita la mitad del dinero que necesitamos. Este año solicitamos 170,000, pero hay otras personas generosas que donan en otro momento o por otra vía. Entonces, generalmente necesitamos como 350,000, como el doble de lo de la campaña. Y con eso principalmente pago a mis ayudantes maestras, que les pago muy poquito, pero que no es totalmente voluntario, es como mitad voluntario y mitad que ganan ese poco dinero, y yo prácticamente no gano nada.
Yeah. Fundraising, we have one fundraising campaign a year. It's through the Donadora sort of crowdsourcing platform. It's usually in August, right before the school year is going to start. And the fundraising goal through that campaign usually is about half of the money that they need, because there are other people who have found out about the project, and outside of the fundraising campaign, they've been supporting the project at other times over the course of the year. This year, the fundraising goal was 170,000 pesos, and so the full budget to run the program for 1 year at the moment is 350,000 pesos. Most of that goes to paying the teachers who collaborate with her. They don't get paid a lot. The teachers are motivated in part to support the program as volunteers, but they do receive a little bit of money, not a huge salary. She says, myself, I don't earn anything. I don't get anything out of this.
Él me mantiene. Él me paga.
Do you know about how many children have been involved in the program since you started it?
Yes. 1,500 aproximadamente en 10 años.
Yeah, over 10 years, probably 1,500 kids have passed through the program in one way or another.
Yes.
I just wanted to mention quickly that LCS is starting a class for the younger children in ESL, and it's for the 7 to 10-year-olds. I don't speak a lot of Spanish. I am going to be one of the teachers, and there are a lot of places on the internet that you can look up how to begin teaching ESL if you don't know a lot of Spanish. So I encourage you to volunteer and to look on the internet to see where you can find helpful classes and information.
Okay.
We have time for one more question.
Ella.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention that in the U.S., another way that kids get help is by the older students who are already advanced. In that system, let's say a kid is very well advanced in his own class, and what he can do is he can volunteer himself to teach the other kids who are behind. And this kid who is teaching, he will earn credits towards his graduation. The school system gives him credits. So that might be another way to get more help to teach. And which is very, you need a lot of people to help these kids. Thank you.
Es muy interesante la idea. Yo de hecho ya he tenido un programa parecido, pero aquí en México la gente voluntaria de esa edad normalmente no es tan constante.
Yeah, she says it's a good idea. She has used that system a little bit within her own school. In regular public schools, it can be difficult because the students who might want to volunteer to do that kind of work sometimes are not, they don't always show up.
You said that elementary education is mandatory and paid for by the government. What about secondary education from middle school and high school? Is that also supported by the government, or is that individual by the family?
Maybe it's worse, but I don't have enough.
No, pero él pregunta si la secundaria también es gratuita y la preparatoria. La preparatoria no es obligatoria, pero sí es gratuita.
Y sí está considerada dentro de la educación básica, la preparatoria ya también.
Yeah.
Pero, ok, perdón, no entendí.
Yeah, she says yes. In theory, at least, junior high school and high school are also free of charge and obligatory.
In theory.
Yeah, but in the practice, sometimes it's not available for all students, especially the high school level. Here in Jalisco, there has been a great effort to build more and more high schools with enough space for all the students who would like to study high school, but they haven't quite covered all of the need. There was not entire coverage for the whole population yet.
We have been very impressed by the level of professionalism in the professionals that we visited here. And from what you're telling me and knowing enough about education, we were university professors, there must be a huge disparity between the classes in the educational systems, and I was wondering if you could address that.
Okay. Dice que ella ha tenido muy buena experiencia del profesionalismo de los educadores con los que han tenido contacto aquí, pero dice yo creo que hay una disparidad enorme entre las clases, entre la educación particular.
Sí, las escuelas particulares trabajan bastante bien y son, o sea, sus propias normas, sus reglas, su interés es mucho mejor que en la educación pública.
Yeah, she says you're absolutely right. There is a big disparity between the classes here in Mexico because private schools actually work quite well. They have high standards, they have solid methodology, they work well with the students, but you can't say the same thing about public schools. So there is a big disparity between the two.
Yes, yo trabajé en una escuela particular muchos años.
Yeah, she worked for many years at a private school, and so she's seen what good education can look like here in Mexico.
Yes.
I would add that I used to volunteer in Mezcala and San Pedro Itzican teaching English. And one thing I learned there, in order to attend the public school, you have to present your birth certificate. But if you're poor and you're born at home, you don't have a birth certificate, so you can't attend school. And it's a very difficult and sometimes expensive process to get a birth certificate. So if you're poor, you can't go to school.
Yes, we have at least three kids, yeah, with that situation.
And this will be our last question.
I support the Khan Academy, K-E-H-A-N, and I understand, of course, that it would not be suitable in most of the situation you're talking about because it relies on computers. But I wonder when you taught in a private school, do they have that? It's all over the world, 43 countries, millions of kids, and it takes the place of the teachers' need to be in a sophisticated system, and the children go through themselves. It's a really wonderful thing to, I don't know, to explore. I don't know how it fits in though.
¿Has oído hablar de eso de la Academia Khan? Sí, existe en todo el mundo, son materiales educativos, obviamente el acceso es por computador, pero dice que sí, que en teoría muchos niños pueden aprender a través de esos materiales sin necesidad de maestros.
Eso está muy lindo, mis alumnos no tienen.
Yeah, that's very nice, but her students don't have access to computers. So it wouldn't be very practical or feasible.
No, not at that level. I was wondering if in the private schools that they...
Pero sí, en las escuelas particulares, ¿tú sabes si utilizan eso?
I don't think so, I don't know, but I don't think so.
That will end our talk for today. And a big applause for